Hello, everyone. Welcome to FemSTEM, the podcast where we are dedicated to bridging the gender gap in STEM fields by spotlighting remarkable women making waves in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I'm your host, Twisha Mehta, and today we have a very inspiring guest whose journey in metallurgy is not only breaking barriers but also paving the way for future generations. But before we dive into our conversation with her, let's set the stage. Diksha Kini is a trailblazer in the field of reactive alumina manufacturing at Rohini Industries. With a background deeply rooted in material science, Diksha's journey is a testament to her passion and innovation, as well as a dedication to pushing boundaries in materials engineering. She is active in the development of reactive aluminas and application in the market space of refractories, technical ceramics, aerospace, and defense materials. Diksha, thank you so much for joining me today. Your journey is truly an inspiration, and I'm excited to delve into your experiences and insights.
Thank you, Twisha, for that lovely welcome. This is the first time I'm actually ever doing such an interview, so it
Mhm.
feels nice to
Mhm.
be introduced.
So, to start off, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your background in STEM?
I always knew I was a STEM person. So, looking at my grandfather, who was a doctor, who dealt with things very casually but with a lot of logic, and looking at my father doing the same thing in engineering, always made me feel that okay, these are very logic oriented
Mm.
and impactful, streams, and that is definitely somewhere where I want to be. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of art influence, and I feel like STEM can go to much greater heights. If we have art in conjunction, and it's very misunderstood. But yeah, I think my background in STEM was right from the beginning, right from my childhood. It's always been looming over me. So
Mm.
I keep seeing people around me doing that. So I think it was something very natural, felt like a natural progression when we eventually, when I got into engineering and then got my master's in ceramic engineering, and now I'm into manufacturing. But yeah, I mean, as much as um, we begin something in STEM thinking it's one thing. STEM has a way of having its own roller coaster,
Mm.
so it will take you up and down its own journey. I mean,
So, like you said, you were surrounded by people who chose the STEM profession, which eventually led you to choose STEM. But then again, why ceramic engineering, right? Like I've heard of electrical, mechanical, computer science, all of software, all of that, but I've never really heard of ceramic. So what led you to choose ceramic engineering out of all the different engineering fields that are there?
okay, so actually, we have misconstrued ceramics as this really new age, unique engineering, but as far as mankind goes, it's actually probably one of the first um, forms of the engineering, probably
Yeah.
almost in little, it dates little before the metal age. Actually, it dates. It's one of the first things. It's one of the most primitive things. We somewhere along the way have just left it at pottery. We never really put our force behind it to go and develop it into ceramics, as what it is called. Plastics was, in the 90s, plastics took its boom, and everybody came to know about it because it was cheap, it was affordable, it was a very easy material to handle because of its low temperatures. Metals, of course, has been making its mark ever since we know.
Mm.
But ceramics somehow, I think, just got lost in this entire materials journey, because as a materials engineering person, you just classify it into three categories, right? Ceramics, polymers, and metals. So I'll tell you how I found it very fascinating though. Is so I was a skater. Okay, so I used to skate. in on the state, and I skated for India and all of that. So we had these very particular bearings called as Swiss bones. And the minute you switch to it, your timing would like get better by 30%. And we were like, whoa, what is this? And all our coaches would tell us was that the bearings of this skate was made with ceramic material, and that used to be very very fascinating. So I was always amazed with how is this material doing this thing, and yeah, I think that kind of stuck with me.
Damn, I like how your one passion eventually led to another passion of yours. So now that you told me like you're working in a manufacturing unit. So what does the manufacturing process look like? What is like the step by step process really?
If you take bauxite, you purify it by Bayer's method. Probably all of us had that in chemistry, right? So you purify it. You remove the red mud. Okay, so you remove that, and now you have alumina. You have Al2O3. Now this has certain amount of impurities. Yeah, it has a lot of sodium oxide. It has a lot of calcium. It has a lot of iron. So now you go through each step to remove each of these impurities. Okay. Now, when you finish removing all these impurities, you come with say about 99% pure alumina. Okay. Now, this alumina, if you heat up to 22-2400 degrees, okay, and each one has its own nuclei, then you have something called as a tabular alumina. Okay, so it's very dense. They look like stones, like really tiny stones that you use in road making and all of that. And that is tabular alumina. Now fused alumina is you just heat this entire mass to 2400 degrees. You just let it become one big you know stone or whatever it is under a lot of pressure, it's under a lot of heat. And then you take this large stone and then you crush it, you break it into bits. That's called fused aluminum. So now each of them is not a single crystal. Okay, so it's part of a larger crystal, and along the cleavage planes, it's just fracturing. Now, if you don't do either of it, you take this and you just say calcine it to 1200 degrees, you get calcined alumina. Now, reactive alumina uh, is an alumina where instead of just simply calcining it, you make sure you control the chemical atmosphere, you make sure you control the temperature cycle, you make sure you are controlling how much oxygen is available to it, and the dwell times. All of this you control, and then you get these really tiny nanoparticles, almost of the order of 100 to 200 nanometers. So each of the particle is a crystal in itself. Okay. Now, what happens with this alumina is the minute you take calcined alumina, you take reactive alumina. If you heat up reactive alumina, it'll start forming, it'll start becoming an entire compound or in whatever shape you give it. Say, I make the shape of a crucible in which you melt metals and all of that. If you make it with both calcine and reactive will sinter as in it'll become slightly liquidous and become one entire thing together. All the particles will fuse together to become, that is called sintering. So that it'll fuse at a far lower temperature. It'll fuse far better, giving you better density. So it'll last for much, much longer, which becomes very critical in components of aerospace, in components of refractories, whereas calcined alumina will take much, a lot of heat. It will take a lot of time. Even after it's done that, there'll be a lot of impurities in it, which we've not taken care of. So that's the basic difference.
Damn. So there's a very elaborate, breakdown of what the manufacturing process looks like. So coming to what my podcast really is about, which is women in STEM. What are some common gender trends that you see in your field today?
Yeah, sure. I think 7 years ago, when I first went into this ceramic conference that happens in India, um, there were about 400 delegates, and we were two of us who were women. Yeah, so I think that was, and yeah, I think it's a bit weird. I think as it is, the Indian male gaze is really weird. So, and
Mm,
having that in such a discrepancy was even weirder. What I'm also seeing though is there are more and more women who've taken up, okay, maybe not in manufacturing, but now there are at least, I would say now that number from two, 8 years ago has probably come up to now a 20. So when you look at it, yeah, I mean, there's a tenfold, increase, but
increase.
it's, it is ridiculously small. And unfortunately, in manufacturing, it is still just only me.
What what would be some benefits or advantages that you have received from working in this field for a really, really long time?
Nothing can phase you. You become very mentally very resilient. So I think I really enjoy that. I really enjoy also a lot of um, people are very very happy. Okay, as much as a lot of people are threatened, there are people who see a lot of hope for their daughters, for their nieces, for their sisters. So the minute they do see me, they'll come and they'll say, I have a niece who's looking for a job. Do you think, she, the minute you see another woman out there, they feel like, oh, maybe my daughter, by the time she's done with her study, is going to be another 5 years. It'll get only better. And if this lady is surviving and she's not dead and she has a smile on her face, maybe it's not such a bad career opportunity for my daughter to be there in manufacturing. It's
Mm.
not going to be the end of the world. So I think that also makes me very very happy that I am able. I don't think I wouldn't say inspire, but if I'm able to give that sense of security to any man, that oh, I can maybe, or even that thought, seeding that thought that oh, maybe my daughter can come work here, won't be such a bad thing, because now you've created a woman who's financially independent, which means you are enabling her with so much that she's not this liability anymore to anybody. She's not she's not a social stigma point where oh, if she's getting beaten up and she still has to just stay with her in-laws because otherwise she can't feed herself. So I think that matters more to me than anything.
Yeah. I feel like it's just a whole thing of seeing more women out in the field that will inspire more women to come in. Yeah, I feel like it's just a whole matter of, seeing more women out there that brings more women into the field. So, what are some strategies that you feel would be really effective if they are implemented that will, eventually lead to reducing the gender gap that's prevalent in the field today?
Um, I think this was done actually by my university when I was in New York. So if it was said any time after 8 p.m., sometimes it would be 2 a.m., sometimes and they would have somebody, like basically somebody who's escorting you home, because it was a tiny radius, within say a radius of 5 miles. Anywhere you needed to go, there would be either like a girl or a man just escorting you home. Like you just walk and they'll just walk behind you. So I think transport safety in any format, and I see that even today, where women who do work with me today on the shop floor, they don't have trouble coming in the night shifts. You know, they are not scared of being as much as we think that oh, they're not going to want to do a night shift, they're not going to be flexible with their hours. No, they are completely fine. Like they are more than happy to do night shifts because It doesn't interfere with their day thing,
Mhm.
jobs as the cooking part or receiving their kids when they come from school. So they're in fact happy when they have lectures. The only trouble they do have is they say, ma'am, humko subah utke, when we have to leave at 6 a.m. there's nobody on the street. When we come at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. there's nobody on the street. So could you arrange for a bus service, or could you arrange? So I think uh, giving that blanket of the transport blanket, I think will enable women to no extent. But I think Indian companies now have their creches in house. So, of course, you are going to leave your child in a creche, probably in the city as well. But just knowing for the mother, and if you let them know that you can bring in your child to work, where you don't meet them, they still don't get to meet them other than their lunch break and after their work. But there's this sense of you know they just feel very very calm, because they know that if something happens to him or her, she's just at an arm's distance, so she can just go and sort it out. So I think these are the two things that will make a very big difference if inculcated in more organizations.
Yeah, these studies started very little things, but then it is more crucial in the bigger picture. So, for the next question, what were three qualities that you feel mm, were vital in getting you to where you are today?
I think three qualities. Okay, let's see. I think to be uh, open to trying anything new, just to be curious.
Mm.
Just don't be hyper cute. Like, don't be that child who's like, "Excuse me, man." Don't be that. Don't be obnoxious, but be in general curious. About like little things, like reading the back of food products. Now, when you meet somebody new, just asking them about what they actually do, instead of them asking you, "Oh, beta, which standard are you in? What are you doing?" I think just being curious about what they've done, what their challenges were. It's just this data bank that you have to keep creating for yourself, so that eventually, when you, because STEM is something very similar, no? When we solve for medical issues, we solve for science, we solve for technology. It's just how much data you have that you're going to extrapolate this line on that graph. And the more the data you have, the better the more accurate your thesis or your product is going to be. So I think being curious is a big one in where I am today. Um, in I think three things, right? The other thing is definitely, however much, if you feel somebody is just trying to block you in getting wherever, but don't give up on people. And I think the third thing, why I am here, and of course I think why I'm here is because I really wanted to make an impact in my country.
Mm. I feel like a major factor, like you said, is just having that curiosity to learn more and the drive to explore further. So, to end it off, what would be your advice to young girls, young women who are aspiring to enter the STEM field today?
Advice would I would advise them from a very young age, start hanging out with very diverse age groups, very diverse social um, ladders, very diverse cultural situations. I think the minute you do that, you break a lot of barriers in your own head, which is more essential um, than you eventually breaking barriers. So, however difficult or weird or uncomfortable it is to sit with culturally different people, to sit with people whose thoughts you don't agree with, but to accept that is a big challenge. The more you're out there, the more you know the more your chances of succeeding at this STEM or gender role or anything in life. I think if you need to succeed, you have to be confident of yourself, and the only way you're going to be confident is if you are not awkward. You just have to find bridges and commonalities with people, then you can break any barrier. And the more you're like, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm this intellectual who only reads Murakami, and I don't know what kind of obscure stuff you're jabbering about. We are going to be creating barriers for them to get to us. So,
Well, thank you for ending it off with a very strong note. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I've learned and, left with so much more knowledge and bits and pieces of information which I would never know before. From, the whole manufacturing process that you explained step by step, to your experiences as a woman in the field, to how now you have just become unfazed and ready to tackle on anything. So yeah, it was genuinely a pleasure and to talk to you today. And thank you so much for your time. This is
thank
the
you, Trisha. It was, I think, as I said, it was the first time I'm doing something like that, and I am so happy that it was so casual, so honest,
yeah.
and it wasn't only very technical centric, even though we did go over it well. And this is, I think, a great initiative. I think having more and more people speak their minds on this, I think, will make us realize that actually it's far more simpler than this huge global issue that we're trying to make it to be.
Thank you so much for encouraging words, Diksha. And with that, this is the FemSTEM podcast where inspiration and knowledge collides to propel us forward towards limitless possibilities. Stay tuned for more episodes from the FemSTEM podcast.